and welcome to the Hugo Award winners of the 2000s.
It's the new millennium.
So this is part of my Reading Through the Hugo Winners project by decade, where I release each decade in an arbitrary order. And good news, guys, this is the last one.
It's over, it's finally over.
So, in honor of the last Reading Through the Hugos video, I wanted to let you guys know that I am celebrating this with an audience poll where you can vote for your top 10 favorite Hugo Award winners and also your 5 least favorite Hugo Award winners, and I will make a video of all of the results and publish that in December 2025. The link is in the description box down below, so please, let's get in that vote. Now this video, like previous videos, are gonna be divided into 3 sections. First, we have the context of what was happening in the world during this decade. Then we get to the winning books by year. And then finally, we get to my rankings by preference. So let's get into it. So in the 2000s, we finally see the long predicted rise of the economic giants in Asia. Countries like India, China, and Taiwan saw double-digit growth during this decade. We also have the 2000s being called the age of turbulence because we have 2 huge financial and economic crises. We have the 2001 dot-com bubble bursting, which panicked everybody, but don't worry, it saw a huge rise in the stock market afterward. We also have the 2008 financial crisis recession. Now, this was being caused by risky mortgage loans. Now, we also see a huge rise in the cost of oil, leading to gas being almost $5 a gallon in the general US. This eventually led to a food price crisis. With the awareness of global warming, we also had a lot of natural disasters in this era, including in 2004, one of the worst disasters recorded on history is the 9.3 earthquake in the Indian Ocean, generating a tsunami that cost 250,000 lives. We also have the highest recorded temperatures in Australia, recorded at 115.5 Fahrenheit and 46.4 Celsius, which eventually lead to the Black Saturday bushfires, one of the deadliest bushfires in Australia. Then in 2005, we have Hurricane Katrina overwhelming the levees in New Orleans, costing billions in damages and leading to the loss of over 1,000 lives. We also have the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attack on the World Trade Towers, one of the biggest attacks on American soil to date, which initiated the controversial War on Terror, including the Afghanistan war against the Taliban. We also have the Iraqi War, which ends Saddam Hussein's rule, and Osama bin Laden being added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list. We also have the anthrax scare by mail in the US, where everyone feared that white powder in an envelope. We also had the creation of the Department of Homeland Security and the passing of the Patriot Act. Now, as far as technology goes, we had a huge rise in the increase of the internet, now covering 1/4 of the globe, which helped contribute to globalization. We also see the rise of wireless internet and the advent of social networking sites like MySpace, Twitter, and Facebook. We also see email now taking over what's become known as snail mail, and text messaging now surging, creating a rise in car accidents. We also see the launch of YouTube in 2005, the launch of Wikipedia in 2001, and the sudden overthrow of the popular search site Yahoo by a new search algorithm upstart named Google. Now, GPS also becomes very common in this era, thanks to satellites around the globe. And we get in 2001, Google Earth, and in 2005, Google Maps. We also have the first hybrid cars hitting the market, and the USB flash drive replaces floppy disks. We also also have a replacement for CDs with the rise of MP3 players like the iPod and iTunes. We also see an increase in domestic robotics, with the most successful domestic robot still being sold today as the vacuum Roomba. We see a rise in the Da Vinci robotics, which are used in surgery, where they no longer have to open up your abdomen all the way for the surgeon to get inside. We also see a rise in robotics toys, with popular ones being the Furby, the Tesca robotic puppy, the educational electronic Leapster Leap Pad for kids, the Tamagotchi, and so many more. We also have a wonderful time for video game consoles with GameCube, Xbox 360, and the PS2 and 3 coming out, as well as an increase in movement technology and the phenomena that was the Wii. Now, we also see a rise in digital cameras and integration with phone for face recognition. We have flat panel displays for TVs and DVRs like TiVo. Blu-ray replaces VCRs. We also see the invention of the vape pen and the return of radio shows with the rise of the podcast.
It's called a podcast.
As far as medicine goes, we see a lot of antibiotic resistance with the rise of something known as MRSA, or methicillin-resistant Staph aureus. And in 2003, we have a SARS outbreak, causing a 9.6 fatality rate worldwide. In 2007, we have a bird flu scare, and in 2009, we have the H1N1 swine flu pandemic. Luckily, in 2006, we have the development of the HPV vaccine to prevent cervical cancer, and we also have the completion of the Human Genome Project, where a full sequence of human DNA is finally completed. Now, as far as space goes, in 2001, we kick off space tourism officially with Dennis Tito paying $20 million to Russia for a single week on the ISS. In 2004, we have the Mars rover landing on Mars. And in 2006, Pluto is demoted and no longer considered a planet.
It's not a planet!
Poor Pluto. Now, we also have a couple of surprise and notable deaths this decade, including Michael Jackson's overdose and Steve Irwin's poisoning. Now, as far as fashion goes, we have the era of the low-rise skinny jeans, crop tops, ballet flats, and long scarves. We also start seeing frosted tips on boys' haircuts, baggy cargo pants, and sagging down to your knees. We have cardigans and trucker hats, and we even have something called geek chic, where glasses are now considered sexy.
She is sexy, though.
As far as music goes, we have the rise of the boy bands with NSYNC, 98 Degrees, and the Backstreet Boys. We also have hip hop reaching its peak, as well as mainstream rap, with singers like Eminem, Jay-Z, and Snoop Dogg leading the pack. We also see R&B rising with Usher, Akon, Alicia Keys, and John Legend. And of course, we can't forget the incredible pop stars. We're talking Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Pink, and Beyonce. We also have alternative rock, Nickelback, as well as Green Day, Fall Out Boy, and many more. Now, we have some incredible, long-lasting franchise movies this era, including the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Gladiator, the Harry Potter franchise movies, as well as big ones like Love Actually, 300, Anchorman, Borat,
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. There are so many more. The big era in this decade are the computer animation movies. Movies like Shrek and Monsters, Inc. And the highest selling DVD of all time, Finding Nemo. God, that was a good movie. The Incredibles and Wall-E. We also start to see the popularization of Japanese anime movies in English, like Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, and the series Death Note. Now, there are some big trends in TV shows, like the rise of cable dramas, with popular shows like Breaking Bad, Mad Men, The Sopranos, Battlestar Galactica, Grey's Anatomy, The Office, Gilmore Girls, CSI, Sex and the City, and so many more. We also have to talk about adult cartoons being very popular, like South Park, Family Guy, Futurama, Robot Chicken, my childhood. Now, the highest grossing movie for this decade is James Cameron's Avatar, and the best-selling book of this decade is none other than Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. And that does it for our context. Let's move on to the books. Starting in 2000, we have the winner, Deepness in the Sky by Vernor Vinge. This is technically a book number 2, but can be read as a standalone. After centuries of colonizing space, humans have finally found sentient life on a lone planet with an on-off star. This is a star whose luminescence cycles in vast extremes. And we're following 2 perspectives. The first is the human race. There are 2 factions, and they are racing to be the first ones to have first contact. We also alternate chapters with the spider-like alien beings of the planet, who are trying to survive the off phase of their sun and accidentally make a scientific discovery that leads them to a cultural revolution, all the while remaining naive of the human battle taking place in their sky. Then coming in 2001, we have Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire by J.K. Rowling. This is book number 4 and should absolutely be read in series. In case you don't know the story, Harry Potter is the boy that lived through a deadly encounter with an evil wizard when he was only a baby, and his parents were killed in the onslaught. And in this installment, he is back at Hogwarts and is chosen to represent his school illegally in the Triwizard Tournament. But there is a nefarious plot afoot, isn't there always? Now Harry must navigate not only the competition that technically he's ineligible for, but also the unstable, darkening wizarding world, who is getting ready for Voldemort, who is trying to return and finish what he started. Then in 2002, we have American Gods by Neil Gaiman. This follows the recently widowed and released from prison man named Shadow, who takes the only job he can get as a bodyguard for a mysterious character named Mr. Wednesday. And this is where things start to get mythologic. I'm talking leprechauns are real, the old gods are battling the new gods, there's fairies. What isn't there in this story? But unfortunately, Shadow finds himself in the middle of this war as he discovers that Mr. Wednesday is none other than an old god, and his team is currently losing. But I won't tell you which one, because no spoilers. Then in 2003, we have Hominids by Robert Sawyer. This is the first of a trilogy of books that take place in an alternate Earth, where Neanderthals, not Homo sapiens, are the dominant race. And we follow Ponter, a Neanderthal physicist who is mysteriously pulled into our world through an accidental science experiment gone wrong. Geneticist Mary Vaughan is called in to authenticate Ponter's Neanderthal DNA and help Ponter acclimate to our world. Meanwhile, back in Ponter's world, his partner Atticor, who might be the only scientist able to pull Ponter back into the Neanderthal parallel universe, is jailed and put on death row after being accused of murdering Ponter. There are politics and religion and even discussions of what could have been in this story. Then in 2004, we have Paladin of Souls by Lois McMaster Bujold. This is the sequel to Curse of the Chalion, but can absolutely be read as a standalone. This book introduces us to a recently cured from madness Dowager Queen, none other than Ista de Chalion. She is out on a pilgrimage, seeking her freedom and her purpose, and ends up on a high adventure, and also is involuntarily chosen as the vassal for the bastard god. He is asking her to go on a mission to answer a prayer dealing with a mystery that's surrounding Lord Arhas and his brother Ilvin. Through her courage and spiritual insight, Ista learns to embrace her own mortality and also her divine calling. In 2005, we have Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This book takes place in a Victorian England where magic still exists, but none of the magicians actually practice it. They're theoretical. And this book follows the only two practical magicians in England. We have Mr. Norrell and his intermittent apprentice, as well as soon-to-be rival, Jonathan Strange. This book revolves around the meeting of and the changing relationship between the two magicians. Then in 2006, we have Spin by Robert Charles Wilson. This is the first of a trilogy. On a night in late October, 10-year-old Tyler Dupree and his best friends and twin heirs, Jason and Diane Lawton, watch as the stars go out around the world. As our three protagonists grow up, it is finally revealed that this is because of an artificial barrier that is surrounding the world, and it's separating Earth from all else, including time. Tyler, now a full-fledged doctor, goes back to meet up with his old best friends, the genius scientist Jason and the now cult leader wife, Diane. Tyler must come to terms with his childhood expectations and trauma, all while the consequences of the barrier and its purpose are very slowly revealed. Then in 2007, we have Rainbow's End by Werner Vinge. This is a standalone. This introduces us to Robert Gu, an elderly poet who wakes up in a young body cured of his Alzheimer's. Yet despite all of these advantages, him and his fellow other cured patients are struggling to find their own significance in an increasingly digitized world. Thinking that they've found their way in by protesting the digitalization of their local university library, they instead accidentally become entangled with a mysterious hacker known only as the Rabbit.
The Wabbit?
And a conspiracy to subconsciously control the masses. Then in 2008, we have The Yiddish Policeman's Union by Michael Chabon. This is also an alternate world where Israel has collapsed in the wake of World War II, and the Jews have sought refuge for the last 60 years in Alaska, but have just been told that they are no longer welcome and need to leave. However, our main character, Detective Meyer, doesn't have time to care about where he's gonna go because his ex-wife has just been made his boss at the precinct, and his job is now on the line. He's put into unpaid leave. So when his heroin-addicted neighbor ends up murdered, it's a welcome distraction until he discovers this murder is a significant puzzle piece to what is happening to the Yiddish community as a whole, and also is going to make him face problems he would rather not face. Then in 2009, we have The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. This is a feel-good child's tale about a toddler who escapes his parents and his own would-be murderer by wandering into the local graveyard, where the ghosts decide to raise him to adulthood. And now we get to move on to the rankings. So this decade kind of feels a little bit like popularity contest more than previous decades. It definitely feels that way because we have a lot of non-sci-fi books that are winning. We also have a lot of beginnings of trilogies. Almost everything seems to happen in an alternative world. And we also have children's books that are winning. I don't know what's going on with this decade, but that's kind of weird, kind of inappropriate. There are children's awards that these books could win. I don't exactly know what they're doing here on the Hugo list, but okay.
Sure, why not?
There's a lot of these books that I just felt were kind of a waste of a Hugo win, because there were some really incredible books that got ignored because these children's books or non-sci-fi books won instead. So I don't really know what was going on in the 2000s in the Hugos, but I think this decade is probably one of the most disappointing decades that I've read so far.
You disappoint me, my friend.
That said, there are some that are good. So let's get into some of these rankings. I know they're going to be very unpopular. Remember, they're just an opinion, and you're allowed to have your own. That's why I'm having a vote. So go vote, FYI.
Vote!
Okay, so coming in at number 10, we have the longest winded book of maybe all time. That's right, I'm talking about Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. You guys, this book is like the quintessential nothing sandwich. While we have magic, we don't actually use it. This doesn't make sense to me. And then we also are supposed to have a story, but we don't really have a plot. Okay, sure. At least we have characterization ad nauseum. And even if you were to whittle this book down or edit it appropriately, it's still a story that I don't think the climax is worth reading the book. And I know this is kind of an unpopular opinion, but I want my 20 hours back that I read this book for. I didn't find it to be satisfying. I didn't find it to be interesting. I didn't find it to be anything worth my time. And I'm really sorry to say that. I think that the Victorian era is just not my era. Anyway, moving on to number 9, and that's going to be American Gods. This book actually had what sounds like a really interesting premise. Even though it's not sci-fi, it sounds intriguing. And I love the idea of exploring what people used to worship, the old gods, versus the new gods or the things that people now worship, like the internet and social media. I find that an intriguing idea. However, the execution of this idea was very poor. I mean, not Philip K. Dick poor, but very close. This story had potential and just didn't use it. And you know what's even more sad is I feel the same about the TV series. It was also long and boring and didn't go anywhere. And that's really sad because this book could have been something cool, and yet it wasn't. So coming in at number 8, we have The Graveyard Book. Now, hear me out here. I enjoyed The Graveyard Book. It was a fun, feel-good story, and I liked the morals that it talked about. But this is an adult science fiction and fantasy award, and children's books have no place here. I think that they have a great place in the reading life, and I'm not opposed to adults reading children's books by any means or stretch of the imagination. I'm glad I read it. I had a great time with it, but it doesn't deserve a Hugo, right? I mean, right? Let's move on to number 7, which is also going to be an unpopular decision, and that's going to be The Yiddish Policeman's Union. This book was very beautifully written, and I think maybe the Hugo voters were trying to make up for voting in children's stories instead of real books or something. Despite the fact that this book is beautifully written, it doesn't really add anything to the genre. It doesn't really add anything in general. I don't really know that it's science fiction. This book belongs on a literary list because it's well written. I just didn't love it, and I just wish other books had won. I find this book not to be a Hugo winning book for me, so I don't really have a whole lot of other things to say about it. It was probably one of the more non-memorable books of this list because it made me feel nothing, and I didn't care anything about the story. I think that if you took the first probably 3 or 4 chapters out of it where they explain that this is, an alternate world, it could have just been like a story that sits on the regular fiction shelf. You know what I'm saying? It didn't belong in the pile, in my opinion. So anyway, moving on. Let's go on to book number 6. Yet another one that I'm surprised I put so high, but this is going to be Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. So, I know it's a children's book. However, I kind of give it a little bit more credence, and I kind of understand just a bit more as to why this book might have won. So hear me out on this. It is a children's story. It probably doesn't belong on the Hugo list. It is a popularity vote. However, J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter series did change many genres. She and the series changed how reading was viewed. Reading became a group activity. It became cooligan. It brought a lot of readers to reading all over again. It was very important for lots and lots of genres, including and especially fantasy and science fiction. And it showed the world what reading can do for the imagination. And this is not something to laugh at. So in a small way, I understand why this story made it on the Hugo. Would I, if I was in charge, have voted or let this book win? Maybe not. There were some really good books this year that I think should have won instead, but I understand a little bit more why this one won than, say, the Graveyard Book, right? I don't know what we're doing there with that. Coming in at number 5, we have one of my most angry books, and that's going to be Hominids by Sawyer. This book had some cool ideas, and I do understand why it won because there was some fun things that this story did. However, personally, for me, I got really annoyed at the book based off of the fact that there were just some really incredible stereotypical sexist things that happened in this story. Specifically, the only female character whose only characterization is her job and the fact that she gets raped. And we get this very descriptive rape scene, and we have to go through this with her. And the only reason that that happens is so when she refuses to have sex with another character later, we all understand why. I don't find that to be necessary. I don't think that that should be part of this story, and I think that it ultimately ruins it for me. It makes it to where I will not read the rest of the series, whether it's good or not, because I can't take these kinds of really ridiculous anti-feminist characters on that. If this had been in the 60s, 70s, maybe 80s, I think it would be a lot more forgivable. But to be in the 2000s and to award something like this is a big no-no for me. And so I'm going to say no. Coming in at number 4, we also have an unpopular opinion, and that's Spin. I know so many people who love this story and are just floored by it, and I just couldn't get into the story. I, again, find that if I ripped the first 5 chapters out of the story, this would be a great character exploration story. A guy getting over his childhood traumas and expectations and all of those things, and I think that's great. But I don't think that the science was really essential for the story, and I found it to be mostly about the characters, which is fine, and their stories and their back drama, but like the science was this much of the book and the characters were like this much of the book. So it just was too much character drama for me, personally. Although I don't begrudge this one because it is number 4. Coming in at number 3, now we're gonna go at least 2 to 5 miles forward here and let you know that the rest of the books on this list are books that I absolutely adored. And book number 3 is Paladin of Souls. Now, you guys, I have to say I finally understand why I could never get into the Vorkosigan Saga series. I finally get it. It's because you've been holding out on me. Lois McMaster Bujold is a fantasy writer, a phenomenal fantasy writer. She is not a science fiction writer, not saying that you can't do both, but oh my gosh, her soul is in this story. It is incredible. People have been sleeping on this series forever. Why is everyone reading Robin Hobb when you could read these stories? Holy cow, it's amazing. This story was interesting and fun, and we have an older female protagonist, and instead of focusing on all of her trauma, we're focusing on the forward future, and we're focusing on what she can do to better herself, and this really cool fantasy mystery situation that I don't want to ruin or anything, but I was really blown away by this story. Were there other books this year that should have won? In my opinion, yes. However, I do have to say that if a fantasy book is going to win, I was really surprisingly impressed with this book. I had a great time. It was interesting. It had aspects of it of multi-layered depth. There were a little bit of areas of pushing the genre forward. I really, really enjoyed it. So this is one that I'm actually going to go back and read the previous book, and I'm really excited to do so. Coming in at number 2, we have Deepness in the Sky by Werner Vinge. So I gotta say, even though this is allegedly a sequel to Fire Upon the Deep, and I will say it doesn't have as much really mind-blowing concepts or ideas as Fire Upon the Deep, this book was incredible. It was a solid read, it was a good pick for the Hugo winners, and I'm really happy to give it to any other sci-fi fan. I feel like the story is a little bit more fun and pleasurable. It's easier to follow than maybe Fire Upon the Deep. However, I think they can be easily read separately, and I really liked Deepness in the Sky. Absolutely do recommend. And that leaves my number one choice, which might have a little recency bias, but I gotta say, this book is a hidden gem. It blew me away. And that's gonna be Rainbow's End, also by Werner Vinge. So I gotta say, this isn't Fire Upon the Deep. It's not. It doesn't have the level of complexity and the depth that Fire Upon the Deep did, but it is its own thing. And it does it so well. There is no book that I have read that has this much fun, but also this much depth. We have kind of the jibe and the gist of Snow Crash a little bit. We have that undertone of smarmy sarcasm, but we also have a hopeful, very prescient story that is still relevant today. I think essentially this book is really about aging. It's about what someone does, even an unlikable character, when they want to feel relevant in a world that's passing them by. And it doesn't really matter the age of your body or your mind as much as it does so many other elements. This book had so many interesting pieces in it. It was a fun conspiracy hacker situation. We also had a little underlying subplot of digitalization and whether we should resist this or not. We have a lot of interesting medicine tech that was in there, and you guys know I really enjoyed that. There was just a lot of really cool pieces of this book that nobody talks about. And I found this book to be incredibly prescient, especially as I get older and I start seeing some of the changes over time and how that affects people. This book might have been my favorite book for many of the decades. This was a really, really good one. And if you haven't picked it up, you gotta. That does it for the 2000 Hugo Award winners. And you guys, that's it. We're done. That's the end of the Hugo by Decade winners. I hope you enjoyed it. I am gonna have some summary videos, highlights, other things that are gonna come out at the end of this year. But don't forget to have your vote and go check out and let me know your top 10 favorites and your bottom of 5 least favorites. So that way I can tell you what the results were in December. I look forward to that. And until next time, you guys, see ya in another video.